the fact that when you're feeling frustrated, how easy it is to think that that's a person's fault.
Mm, mm,
I think that that's
yeah.
such a interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, and that I don't know how much you have followed. You've been on vacation, but um, I am going to be doing a series of podcasts with the professional um, business podcast network, and they send a list of 20 questions. So I've been working to answer those questions, and they'll use some of that content for our time together
Mhm.
in the actual podcast. And so anyway, I say that to say that a lot of folks would a lot of consulting agencies would say things like, one of the biggest issues in family-owned businesses is communication,
Mhm.
or poor communication, and I would dive underneath that to say, and this kind of ties into your attribution bias,
Mhm.
if I got that right, and that is. It's not just about better communication, it's about better understanding, followed by better levels of acceptance of the other person. So instead of blaming that person, understand them better. Come to a deep level of acceptance of who that person is at the core, and the need then to blame begins to dissipate.
Yeah, it's it definitely is an interesting phenomenon. Something I've even experienced recently, just on vacation. Traveling with a newborn. Crying. A newborn crying is anxiety provoking,
Mm,
and then getting back to work, and both myself and my wife, because we were out for over a week, there's a lot of catching up to do, both with
yes.
housework and with both of our jobs. So it's extremely stressful, and it's it's easy to go from feeling that stress to feeling like it's somebody's fault.
Mm, mm,
And and that is like, that goes beyond, like, sort of what you're saying. It goes beyond just communication, because it's
mm.
like understanding that your mind is doing this, playing this trick on you. And I feel like if you focus just on good communication, you would perhaps you'd try to, I don't know, being aware that that's a phenomenon, I think, is really important, because then you can try to take a moment and perhaps don't engage, don't trust your thoughts, don't trust what you're thinking when you're feeling that way, when you're feeling agitated, because no matter what happens when you're in that state, everything is being filtered through that lens, that frustration lens. So if you try to communicate well, you're gonna everything that's coming into your world is being filtered through that. So you're gonna listen, and that listening is part of communication, and then speaking
Hmm.
is the other part. But you're listening, you're filtering out all kinds of stuff, and you're only taking through. You're trying to listen, but you're only getting out of the like the negative things when you're in a frustrated state. And then when you communicate back, you communicate in a very unproductive way as well, because you're communicating through those biases. So I think that strictly trying to communicate more effectively is, it's tricky advice. It depends on what specifically the advice is around communicating better. It's not like you can just be a better active listener, or
Mm.
speak more clearly, and that's what a lot of people think of when they think of communication.
Yeah, and it reminds me of some of my knowledge and training surrounding emotionally focused therapy, or the emotionally focused model, which dives underneath. really if you talk about it from a communication standpoint, it would be meta communication, right? It
Yes.
is the communication that has to happen underneath the communication. And it has to do with core issues, simple things, but powerful things like, do I feel safe in this conversation with you? Um, do I have enough trust, safety, and trust in you to be able to be clear and authentic about what's really going on? That meta communication that lies underneath the communication. I think that an example of that would be a conversation I had with a couple who own a business together, and she was frustrated with him that he hadn't done anything to help lay the groundwork for her future, in terms of things like his last testament and will, his life insurance policy, and things along those lines. And when she got down to it, she said, I'm a vulnerable. I'm like many women. I'm vulnerable, and if something were to happen to you, I wouldn't feel. It would be really hard for me financially, and I would hope that you'd want to take care of me. So when I got her to talk about the meta communication piece, it was, I feel unsafe and unprotected. And when I feel that way, I get vicious, and her behaviors then were a reflection of a core need around safety and trust, and that she was going to be protected. But the way that it came out in the interaction was not the way she would like it to be.
Yeah. That's a that's a good example. I'm thinking about framing and how important it is to reframe things in your mind. How is it that you keep a tether feeling like a positive thing, keeping you tethered to reality and not an anchor that's dragging you down?
In order for me to help her shift from being that anchor to just being the tether, I had to attend, basically present to her in the ways that work for her, right? And so I would have to bring facts and costs and things like that along with my idea, so that it appealed to her rational side, some of that guardian strength, for her to be able to put the pieces together in a concrete way, in a financial way that made sense to her, and then with a measured risk and a better understanding, she could shift from being that anchor to more of a tether. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm thinking about the lenses that you wear at any particular time. How much that plays an impact on the ability to decipher the difference, because I can imagine that sometimes even the tether feels like an anchor. It just feels like somebody's
Mm,
being
mm,
like, they can't see the vision. They're things are changing. We're going to get left behind, and
mm-hmm,
and I don't know, because it's so tied in with emotion. Emotion makes it hard to objectively see reality. So just like deciphering the difference when you sit with that issue, like, is this an anchor moment or is this a tether moment? And like trying to like step back and get in that meta communication that you were talking about, step back and think about which one is this? Like, how should I approach this conversation?
yeah, that's fascinating that you say that, and I think that, um, when an innovator, or when my head is in the clouds, and I'm really kind of moving in a nice rhythm around creativity, and ideas about business generation, there's a euphoria to that. There's a high to it, and it feels glorious, and there's almost a godlike understand, or expectation of, come on, you should get this. This makes total and complete sense. And so either a tether or an anchor feels like a real pain in the rear. And it's like being messed with when you're in a euphoric state. It's like, no, come on, I don't want to leave this state. I don't want to come down to earth. This is great where I'm at up here right now. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Yeah, and I think that that's where great communication exists. It's a step beyond just trying to speak clearly and concisely, and a step beyond just active listening, because you have to understand the frames through which you're engaging with this conversation, and the emotion that's coloring everything that you're taking in and that you're putting out. So it's just, and even for those of us that are well practiced in it, it's still challenging. It's still like a really difficult thing to
Mm.
decipher the difference. Um,
Yeah,
I
I think
regularly
that
feel
I would.
myself in that state of kind of feeling frustrated and knowing that this frustration I'm feeling should not be directed at this individual. Like I know that this is
Yes,
not where
yes,
this should be. That I got to get myself right before I
yes,
re-engage with this, or I'm going to make a mistake.
yes. Well, and for me, Aaron, it starts with a commitment, really, of understanding the role. I've read here in the last 6 months a book now a couple times called Five Voices, and it's really the five types of folks in an organization that are really needed for the organization to function at in the best possible way that it can. And historically, I've had issue with the guardian role the most. It is the one role that agitates me the most, and so for me, it started with, okay, I'm going to examine this role, and I'm going to decide that it has value, because previous to that, I would just wash away any possible value that the guardian role had, and wanted to just fly on with my ideas. And so it started with a commitment to better understand the different roles in an organization, and then to value each of those roles. So even in our relationship, sometimes you have played the guardian with me, and it feels like a kid who just took a school project to the teacher and was so proud of it, and the teacher goes, "Yeah, nice, but here's what you could do differently." There's a disheartened kind of a aw immediate effect. And so the kid wants to grab his project and run out of the room with it and say, to hell with you. But there's really you get pulled down from the clouds, but there's really some value in that guardian and some of the observations. And some of the data that they have access to, some of the questions, then the hard questions that they ask, really are incredibly valuable to the end process.
Yeah, it's interesting, and like conversely, I'm thinking about how each one of those five roles are going to be challenged by some of the other ones because they just have a very different worldview. And I think that this relates to,
Yes.
it relates to valuing diversity. And in our world
Mm-hmm.
today, we tend to think of diversity in terms of like demographic information, like, gender or ethnicity. But there's another layer of diversity, and it's a deeper layer, and it's sort of who you are, your worldview, how you approach things. And
Mm-hmm.
if you reject that type of diversity, it really is at your peril. Like there's going to be
Mm-hmm.
problems if any one of those elements is completely dismissed, because it might work for a while, and until you need that portion, you need that personality type to take care of this particular issue, and it doesn't exist. So then everything sort
Yes.
of goes off the rails. So I mean, I think that is a really strong call for um, embracing diversity, and in
Mm-hmm.
knowing, you know, I think that it's easier to appreciate it when you've, ahead of the conflict, you've let yourself know that the guardian is important. Like, so when you're in the conflict, you're like, I'm going to take a step back for a moment, and I'm not going to say the things that I'm feeling, because I know that what you're doing is you're trying to do something that's in everyone's best interest. And then you can kind of like not be as aggressive towards that entity because it's not the enemy. It sometimes is the tether.
Yes.
So you got to work out
Yes.
whether it's
Yes.
overstepping its role in becoming an anchor, or whether it really is trying to pull the person that is the big picture thinker down to like a practical set of like, can we actually do this, instead of how amazing would it be if we were able to.
Mm, yes. Yeah, yeah, and so again, it's that understanding and acceptance of diversity, and you and I've talked at length a couple different times about neurodiversity
Yep.
and how folks can be so different and so valuable to organizations. In fact, you've made it a conscious effort in at Tetra Prime to not just attract like-minded folks, to not just attract folks that are like you, but to attract other folks into your organization, so that you can have that balance. But it's I think sometimes tougher to do that because it's easy to powwow with like-minded folks. It's sometimes more challenging to powwow with folks that have what you call a different framework or different mindset.
Absolutely. And, one of our values is to be empirical. And empiricism is good because, science is what brought us all the amazing things that we have around us. But I also think that it makes dealing with diversity a little bit easier because occasionally I'll have an idea. Not occasionally. I'd say it happens relatively frequently, and somebody will challenge me on that idea, and
Mm.
they have a different opinion. In your traditional organization, you could go a number of different routes with that. You could say, well, the person that has the most authority ultimately vetoes they just whatever they say goes. You could have something that's more democratic and everyone could vote on it. And I don't really like either one of those approaches. I want to get down to the bottom of what's true. A
Mm.
lot of times we're trying to focus on conversion focused things. So like bringing business into an organization. So I don't really matter. It doesn't matter to me about opinions. Like I just need to know what is accurate and what's true in the situation
Mm.
for that target audience. And that target audience might not be anyone that's in the conversation that's having a conflict right now. So what we do is we
Yes.
just sit down. I tell everyone, all right, form a hypothesis on this, and we're going to run a test.
Hmm.
And then we'll analyze the results of that test, and but frequently we've ran tests and I would be wrong, and I just let go. Like, hey, th- this this seems to be the right answer, and this is the way that we're gonna go with this. But it does take some level of discipline to not upfront just be like, no, we're doing it my way, to like kind of take a back seat
Yeah.
to like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and it takes some, I think, courage also to, and some humility to be able to say, "Yep, I was wrong about that," and to accept that and allow the truth to then emerge.
yeah, and I think I can imagine a lot of family business owners have that phenomenon too. Like, is it more important for you to be right, more important for you to
Hmm.
have control, or is it more important for the unit to move ahead effectively? Is it more important for the business to thrive, or is it more important for you to maintain your authority? Or is it more? And those are decisions that we have to make. And for me personally, it's more important for our team to thrive than it is for me to be perceived as correct or for me to exert my authority.
Yeah,
Because I just
yeah,
know, which one of those boats would you rather be in? One's got holes in it and it's bound to sink. And then the other one,
that's
although
right.
it's difficult to be on, it has more staying power. It has the ability to make it into the future.
Yeah. And you are at, I think, the forefront of a style of leadership that is just starting to come of age. It involves more humility. It involves kind of an empowering style of leadership. It's kind of a leadership by example. Sort of leadership, and I think that we're seeing many books now along those lines. We're seeing many leadership styles along those lines. It's just starting to catch fire.
I think so, and I think that it's yeah, I think it probably will be the way of the future with so many people that are working remotely and just under different work conditions than people worked in the past. I think that in the past you could perhaps have a more authoritarian style, and even that you still have to be really really bright to have an authoritarian style. You have to be you have to be near genius level to have the endurance to answer all of those questions. So for one, it's really hard. It's not a
Mm,
easy way to be, but for two, I just don't think that the authoritarian style can be as effective with the way that we find ourselves working. With everyone spread out, and I think that there has to be. I think the group cohesion has to be there through people wanting to be a part of the group and not having to be a part of the group because you know I just don't think that many groups are going to hold together very well under an authoritarian type of um, because people have options and because people are so spread out, and I just don't I just don't think that it works well anymore.
yeah. Well, and a piece that happened, I think, that really kind of got some takeoff power was during the pandemic when folks did have to go home and start to work remotely. But somehow in that whole soup of what happened, employees across the nation began to demand more respect. They began to demand more flexibility. They begin to demand more affirmation for their value. They begin to demand more participatory expectations from their leaders. That they want to be a participant, not just an object that's in place from maybe an authoritarian leader. And so we're really seeing a surge now of folks, and it's probably appropriately so, right? 67% in the last survey said 67% of employees are disengaged. They're not engaged in their job or career, and so there's I think a wave coming right now of folks that really are demanding to be more a part of, and not just the object of somebody in authority.
Yeah, I think that you're correct. And I think part of the tricky part of this too is empowerment is not just a matter of like granting authority to people. That it's a double-edged sword that when you empower people, you actually have to give them executive leadership capability. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
most people don't realize that the things that executives do, it's not easy. And it's sometimes it's not easy to sleep with the decisions that you have to make. And
Yes.
there's actually hard things that are going on, hard decisions that are being made, even prioritizing work and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, people want it, and leaders have to be prepared to train that ability and to to at least to allow people the opportunity to feel what it feels like to be at that level and to give them the research because some people don't really want to be there, but I think everyone wants to feel what it feels like to be an executive. And then once you get there, if you're like, these decisions weigh heavy on me, this really is anxiety
Mm-hmm.
provoking, then I think that that's good. It creates more balance
Mm-hmm.
and more appreciation for what other people in other roles do. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's more than just saying here's some authority. It's like you have to almost get to the operating system of individuals on the team, and again, it comes back to this like this meta learning that you got to get back to.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people that think that they want this, they have scripts running in their head. They have files that are running that don't allow them to do the types of things that would be necessary as an executive. So it's rather challenging to train somebody up to that level. Um, it,
Yes.
but it's I think that there's no option. You have to make that a road that's available to people. Which, I mean, the good news is upward mobility is going to be much more possible than it ever has been before. And I think that we're going to have a deeper
Yes.
appreciation of people through different ranks within organizations. But the downside is it's going to be hard to help people with those. It's almost like your managers are going to have to be more therapist in the future, because it's the skills that need to be trained are like deeply connected to some things in your operating system, like your ability to command a meeting. Well, what if you don't feel that you
Mm-hmm.
deserve, that you have any right to command a meeting? Well,
Mm-hmm.
if that's a script that you play in your mind, that you have no right to tell people what to do, then it's going to be hard for you to take control of that room. It's going to be hard for you to find out what the action items are at the end of the meeting. It's going to be hard for you to ask people to plug those action items in, and it's going to be hard for you to look to your team members and say what time, what day will you have this done by, and that's all like psychological type of development that has to happen, and that now has to happen within the business world. And I believe that that's part of what's going to
Mm-hmm.
set you apart from other people, is that the type of training that people are going to need is going to get to that level with the new way that we work.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited about that, and you make an interesting point, and we got to wrap up here in the next couple of minutes. But if I got you right, it's like there's a that wave of new kinds of employees coming, demanding so much more, and they also at the same time have an operating system in place that may prevent them from being in some of these leadership roles as they might like to be. And so the proper way to lead them is by working with their desire and also their resistance, their operating system, and being able to recode or update the programming of those operating systems in a way that they can command that meeting and feel good about it, or maybe command that first meeting and feel terrified.
Hmm.
But having then had the experience of being terrified and leading the meeting makes the next meeting a little bit better.
That's absolutely what I'm saying. And I think that that's going to be a real awakening for people that even want to empower others. So the first level is that you have to get on board with empowering other people. The second level is that you're going to have to understand what it means to empower people. You can't just all of a sudden grant you can't just grant authority and tell people to do it like this is now your responsibility, because there's some things that are in the operating system, like self-confidence and like some self-beliefs that people
Mm-hmm.
have, that those things have to be nurtured along the way. And that is difficult for somebody that never had that. They were never programmed that way. They've always had
Yes.
uh, they've always felt entitled to share their opinion. They've always, so they don't have these
Yes.
scripts
Yes.
that are so how, and they just can't
Yes.
understand, like, why would you not do this, like that it's this easy. But you don't understand that this particular person has been programmed in a different way, that you can't just give them what you think is the playbook that worked for you. You have to understand that they're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with all kinds of emotional
Mm-hmm.
challenges as they try to do the things that you do.
Yeah, that's really well said. It's just a nice way of saying that my path to leadership may not be my employee's path to leadership. It may be very much individualized, or need to be individualized in such a way that makes sense for them. Um, and you're right, folks like you and I, Aaron, and maybe have always been, from our blueprint, from our original programming, really kind of um, eased into leadership in maybe more of a natural way. But not the lion's share of employees out there aren't built like that. They're coded. They grew up with, like you said, they grew up with a different playbook, and we're going to have to understand that playbook in order to then be able to help them upgrade it.
Yes, definitely. And I think that members of our team at first were just sort of surprised that I really was granting that much flexibility and that I really wanted people's opinions.
Yes.
And so,
Yes.
so you go through that phase, and then once they realize that you really do want to empower people, then you like this is really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you get to the phase of like teaching the actual skills and becoming more proficient with the skills, and I think that the self
Yeah.
confidence comes along with that type of stuff. But it's a much slower process than I think that most people would realize if you're starting from a different point. You know, if you join the journey
Yes.
at a different point, then it's sort of
Yes.
shocking people that had to join further back. The challenges that they may face are just, you would not even think that that would be a challenge if that's not where you started.
Yes. Yes. Well, and it gets me super excited about making an impact on the world, right? Because when you really mentor and train up somebody to be a leader like you do with the folks at Tetra Prime, those that enhance confidence and self-esteem, and enhance character, all those things, they don't just help Tetra Prime, they help when they go home to their family.
Mm-hmm.
They help with them as a father, or they help with them at church and potential leadership opportunities at church. And so it's exciting for me about my business to be able to have that, what you have there at Tetra Prime. But I start to fantasize about the expanded impact on the world as well.
Yeah, it is. It is part of. This is actually a conversation that I'm going to have with our team pretty soon. But I want to make it a part of our vision and mission statement that I believe that elevating people to that status is part of what I want to do for people. It's in growing Tetra Prime larger, just allows us to do that for more people. It allows us to expand more people in that kind of way. And the marketing is almost just the resistance that we are pushing against. You know, you need weights to get strong, right? So you need some sort of
Mm,
resistance. We need something
yes.
challenging to overcome, at something, a long-term focus as a team. We're going to overcome these challenges, and marketing is just the challenges that we picked. But any family-owned business has their own challenges, you know, and the challenges are just the resistance. It's just the weights that you're lifting. it's
Yes.
it's the thing that you need to
Yes.
develop. um,
Yes.
so yeah, it's fascinating. I think these are going to be really relevant conversations.
I really enjoyed this, as I so often do when you and I sit down and start to talk about many things. But today we're talking about family owned businesses, and that's kind of where we started. And much of what we talked about today, I think, may resonate with the family business owners or members of a family that are part of a business, and hope that it's helpful in some way.